Hi Facebook friends, happy Sunday night to you. We're here with an update. Nick's on the other side of the camera, so I told everybody on my page to bring some questions about Florence and whatever else you want to know about the weather. So we'll get to that in just a minute. I'm going to give you a quick overview of what's going on. Many of you joined me on the Florence update a few hours ago. Not a whole lot has changed. It's basically the same situation. Not a whole lot has changed since yesterday either, which in a way is a good thing because it means our confidence level is going up. The negative side, of course, is it still looks like a significant impact from this storm, a major impact for parts of the Carolinas and Virginia later this week. All right, here's a look at the current radar in Virginia. Really not much going on. Still some pretty decent showers here on the tip of the northern neck. You guys, if anybody's tuning in, have been getting rain for a couple of hours, but otherwise just a little bit of drizzle, and that is about it. All right, here's the big picture. There's Florence in the corner of your screen, and we'll show you it's still over 1,400 miles from Richmond. So we got a long ways to track this, and it's not moving in this direction. It's moving in this direction, again, towards more the Carolina coast, moving due west at this time. We'll get back to Florence in a minute. Here are the current temperatures: 69 in Richmond, it's 70s along the coast, low 60s off to the northwest. There's the big picture up to the northeast where fall is showing itself. Temperatures there in the 50s tonight. And you go out west, a little bit warmer out that way, but all in all, starting to look a little bit more like a September map. These were the highs today, midsection in the 70s, 80s in the plains and parts of the Rockies, some low 90s in the southeast. So still some real hot, muggy weather just to our south. And that's because there's a little front sitting just to our south that's going to come north tomorrow, and that's going to turn our winds back to the south. And that means tomorrow's going to be a lot warmer. We were only in the low 70s here in the metro today, upper 60s for the overnight, a little cooler off to the northwest, and then highs tomorrow, check it out, much warmer than today, mid 80s, and even a 90-degree reading, a possibility in southeast Virginia near Williamsburg. So a lot warmer weather for tomorrow. Now look at the rain chances as we go through the week. Tomorrow's about a 40% chance, scattered showers and storms, a little higher chance on Tuesday, a little lower Wednesday and Thursday, but we're still going to have a few of these showers and storms around. And then this is all highly dependent on the track of Florence, but right now I still think it's better than 50-50 shot. We'll see at least some rain Friday, Saturday, and Sunday in central Virginia, and it could be a lot more than some. So let's get to it now. First with the maps for tonight here, just a few showers. Tomorrow, a few scattered showers and storms around in the afternoon. Going into Tuesday, you'll see they become a little bit more numerous. That's a lot in the afternoon popping up. We go into Wednesday, and again, some showers and storms in the picture, and then all eyes will be on the coast. Not quite showing up on this map yet, but eventually on Thursday, the storm tracks in. All right, I'm going to show you the two camps here. There's really two variations on where this storm track is going. There's a lot of models that we can look at, but really the European and the American kind of show the two camps. First one is the European, and this is what I'm showing. This is 6 o'clock Thursday morning. There's a storm off the coast making its way towards southeast North Carolina. Watch what happens. As I put this into motion, you'll see it does make landfall, and then it moves inland. There you go. And the core, tremendous amount of rain moves into central and western North Carolina, then up into the Roanoke Valley, potentially even the Shenandoah Valley. Some folks have been asking me about that. And Richmond would be kind of on the right side of this. This may eventually turn a little bit more in this direction, so it would be a flood threat in central Virginia as well. But this would be a tremendous flood threat for much of North Carolina, heading up into central and western Virginia more than the coast. The other solution brings the storm to or just on shore in North Carolina and then kind of hangs around here for a few days. So that's a different scenario. We'll show that now. Again, this is Thursday morning. Storm's a little farther off the coast than the European model, but watch what happens here. It comes to the coast, it moves just inland, hangs around the Outer Banks for several days. That's Saturday night. So it approaches on Thursday, hangs around right into Saturday. Tremendous amount of rain down here in eastern North Carolina. And the thing is, if this thing stays near the water, it's going to maintain some of its intensity. So we're going to be dealing with a hurricane force winds as well for a couple of days in the Outer Banks. This would absolutely be devastating for the Outer Banks if this verifies. And certainly Virginia Beach and many of the tributaries coming up off the bay are going to be under the gun as well. We've already seen some flooding from the rains we've had. Somebody from Colonial Beach, Nick, checked in earlier and said they're already seeing flooding there, and the storm's not anywhere close.
Matthews had some. We have some videos from there too.
And I think Gloucester. So just imagine if this thing sits here, the flow is counterclockwise, so it's bringing that onshore flow into Virginia as well, and that would be for several days. So it's really which one's worse than the other. They're both quite bad, but for different locations. The European obviously moves it farther inland, and it's a very serious flooding threat for inland locations. The GFS, or the American model, is a little bit closer to the coast, which I have a feeling there might be something in between that verifies, but it may end up being a little bit closer to this. I'm not so confident it's going to go so far west because of the building ridge to the north. Is it going to shove it to the west? Or will this ridge build on this side, which some of the models are indicating now, so it really can't go anywhere, and it kind of sits around the eastern part of the state. So notice on this model, the Roanoke Valley doesn't really see anything here through Saturday. This is only through Saturday. We go a little bit farther out, and it just kind of sits until Monday. So we're talking, people are asking the time, the Outer Banks could feel some effects late Wednesday, but certainly Thursday. And even here, we could feel some impact on Thursday into Virginia in the way of increased rain or wind because of this persistent onshore flow. And it would be Thursday through potentially next weekend. So that's the timing. All right, let's show you the stats. Winds are at 85 miles an hour. This is as of the 5 o'clock advisory. I wouldn't be surprised if they are stronger at 11. And it's possible it could be a Cat 2 by the time we get to 11 o'clock. Possible. It's Cat 1 right now. Moving to the west at 7. Here's the forecast track. Becomes a Category 3, and then a 4 here Wednesday afternoon. Look at those forecast winds up to 150 miles an hour. This is a powerful Category 4. We feel highly confident in this track. It's what happens after that, which of course is 3 days away, that becomes the challenging part. Does it plow inland and just keep going? Or does it slow down? And because of the steering currents weakening, I have a feeling it's really going to slow down and potentially even stall near the coast. So here's the forecast from the Hurricane Center. Brings it on shore potentially as a Category 4 or a high-end 3 on Thursday afternoon. And then if it does move inland like this into central North Carolina, it would be a tropical storm. Where does it go from here? Does it come up into Virginia? Does it kind of stall out, sit down here like many of the models are saying, and then drift east? It's really a hard call right now, and the model data is all over the place. Some of the ensembles, which are variations on the main run of the model, are shifting it a little bit farther east or even farther west. So this is kind of the compromise right in the middle. People have been asking me if it's possible that it turns, Nick, and it's still certainly a possibility. I mean, it's so far away. We don't know. Things could change pretty dramatically. I don't think it's likely that it turns far enough, fast enough that it escapes the coast. I think it's pretty much a given we're going to be feeling some major impacts.
Deborah Barksdale, she's wondering, when exactly do you think we'll know the track it will take? She's saying Tuesday night maybe? Is it Wednesday?
Well,
like, what is your, as we get
you know,
closer?
my feelings on that, yes, we pretty much know it's coming to here. So I think the exact track is not even something to really focus too much on now, because you're going to have a broad area that's impacted by this storm, some more than others. The main question, which hopefully we will answer by, say, Tuesday, is whether we think this is going to be a serious inland threat much farther west, or will it just be more a coastal event. And I think for folks worried about the Outer Banks, maybe you've got a place down there, Virginia Beach, you know you're going to take a pretty good hit either way. If it moves inland, it'll be a faster hit because it'll start shifting inland. If it sits along the coast, it's going to be a really, really bad hit because it's just going to keep doing the same thing over and over again. So I will show real quick before we go into some more questions. Isaac, folks were asking me earlier about Helene and Isaac. Helene I'm not going to even worry about because it's way out there and it's likely turning right into the open waters. Isaac, this is a spaghetti plot. Sorry about that. So there's the spaghetti plot. What a mess that is, right? So look at how close together the lines are down here. That's why I said the confidence is high. It's when it gets right to the coast, does it start doing this little wobbly thing? Does it come inland? Notice some of the models that even bring it inland still do that little loop over North Carolina and then pull it away. So the various colors are the actual hurricane models or operational models. The yellow ones are the ensemble models for the most part. So, but it gives you an idea of the uncertainty really happens right there at the coast. Pretty wild, isn't it? All right, so Isaac, here it is. Winds are at 70, but it is forecast to weaken a bit after. Whoa, they actually made it into a hurricane, but it does weaken as it goes west. Made it into a Cat 2 here on Tuesday, and then eventually it's going to weaken as it heads into the Caribbean. How far west it actually survives, we'll see. But that is something to watch, because ultimately, if it hangs together, it's going towards the Caribbean. Could it come up towards the Gulf? One never knows. I mean, but that's a long, long ways off, because that's Friday, and we're a long ways from that. So I'm going to go back and put the track of Florence up here, just while we're talking about it a little bit. But there's the track. I know folks are asking about wind and rain and so on, and we'll get into a little bit of that. So do you have some questions for me right now? I know, and this is hard for Nick, too. This is hard for me when I'm flying solo. But
Donna's wondering, which model do we rely on most, GFS or Euro?
You know,
a technical question.
Yeah, it really varies. This was asked of me earlier, and honestly, there's no particular model that we're relying on. These operational models have gotten better with hurricanes, but we actually have a bunch of hurricane models, which I will try to bring up for you in just a second on here, and then we'll show it to them, Nick. But there are models that are made specifically for the tropics, and so we look at a lot of those too. You're looking at the whole big picture. You're looking at the pattern. I talked about this last night, that we're looking for a ridge of high pressure to build north of the storm. Does it build to the west? You know, does it give way to the storm? Those are the questions that we have to answer. And that ridge is going to start building over the northeast tomorrow. So this will become a little bit clearer. But, you know, things can change. And when you've got a monster hurricane, it can tend to do whatever it wants.
Tanya's asking, does it have a chance of landfall through Chesapeake Bay?
I never say never, but the chances are extremely low, because if it gets that far west, North Carolina's in the way. It can't make, it's very hard to get any kind of a direct hit on Virginia just because North Carolina is sitting in the way.
Joe Spencer saying mountains in Roanoke. If it does this, it reminds me of the flood of 1985.
If you want to come over here, Nick, I'll show this. This is a map of the various models, and some of them are the hurricane models. You can see the consensus is pretty good, because these are really bunched together, even when it gets close to the coast. But you see a lot of black in here. That's a lot of the twirling or the circling that's going on the models. And some of the one camp, as I said, I'm really breaking it down into two, because it basically is that. One is along the coast or just offshore, and one is a little bit farther inland. So, you know, we'll see what happens with that. I also showed the rainfall earlier, and there's a couple of things here. So I'm going to go to two separate. Just hold on, Nick. I haven't been able to bring that up yet, but I'm going to bring up the two models, because it's going to show the difference in impact depending on which happens here. So this is, I'm looking for total precip, and I can't find it. My eyes must be going here.
Oh, is it that?
Total precip, there we go. Okay, so this is the GFS model, and if I bring it through about early next week, you can see the deep purple is where the heaviest rain is. And that's 20 to 40 inches of rain. I mean, down here, it could potentially, that's a tremendous amount of rain. It's 20 inches or more, basically. Okay, so that's focused on the coast. When you go to the same forecast, but with the European model, watch what happens. So it's all to the west. So the coast doesn't get quite as much rain. Still gets a decent amount, but this is really a 2 to 4 inch rain in here. while this is potentially up to 20 inches of rain. And that's a bad situation, obviously, for the mountains. So you see the difference there. It does shift east after that, but the European is definitely farther west and north than the GFS.
And this is kind of a common question that we've been having. Vicky Biggs Coleman, she says she lives in Richmond, but she's going to be in the Outer Banks. What day should I start home? You have a lot of people that are
she's going to be in the Outer Banks. She's not there yet. If you're not there, well, I mean, maybe she's going to go and
for a couple days.
Maybe she's taking care of business down
and even
there.
Like
so
Tracy,
that is a valid
she was
question.
telling us that she had a girls' trip planned to Charleston. And she's really
Yes, you can blame Tracy Sears because she did the same thing. The last time we had a storm come in to Charleston last year, so or the threat was in Charleston. I don't remember which storm it was, but yeah. So the question is, Outer Banks. You might be going there to take care of things before the storm hits. I have a feeling people have been asking me about evacuations. That'll usually happen when a hurricane warning is posted, that emergency management will make the move to do all the evacuations. I think that'll happen on Tuesday. It might be later Tuesday, or it might even be earlier. So Tuesday's the day. If you need to go down and take care of business in the Outer Banks, I would do it tomorrow, because once evacuations start, it's going to get a little crowded on the roads.
April's wondering, is there any tornado risk with Florence?
Absolutely, and I don't know where April is, but we always look to the front right quadrant of the storm. And I mean, if you were to break it up into 4 slices, you're going to the top right. So a storm that travels here, as you see on the map, it's to the front right. So you're going to be talking up into parts of Virginia, if it moves inland, would be under the threat of tornadoes. Now, doesn't mean tornadoes can't occur in another quadrant, but they're just most likely in that quadrant. And I wouldn't be surprised to see some tornado watches in northeast North Carolina and up into central and eastern Virginia if that track verifies. If it sits along the coast, it might just be up into Hampton Roads, and along the Outer Banks might get into some tornado watches, but Richmond may be spared at that point.
Christina's wondering if there are any chances of it hitting a Category 5?
There's always a chance. The data hasn't shown that. And I don't think that it's likely, but it's always possible. Will it hit the coast as a Cat 5? Probably not. I think I told you guys that might even weaken a little bit as it comes close to land. One of the reasons is land is friction for the storm, so that can cause a little bit of weakening just as it hits. It's going to go over the Gulf Stream. Some people have been talking about the Gulf Stream, and that's the warm water off the coast. But once it gets on the west side of the Gulf Stream, it might actually weaken a little bit before it hits land.
Had a little temporary issue where I can't see the comments.
Uh-oh,
okay.
uh-oh. Yeah, this is...
Shawnee says, Lord have mercy, my blood pressure went up.
Oh, don't let your blood pressure go up.
Red-faced emoji.
Here's some of the guidance that I look at for the intensity of the storm. And these are the various models. And this gray area is a Cat 4, the white's a Cat 5. Notice no models even get up to the line of Cat 5. So, but there's good consensus that it could be a Cat 4. And then it drops off. That's most likely because of a landfall at that point. There's no guarantee this thing makes landfall either at this point. You know, it's likely at this point. The chances have increased considerably, but there's still a possibility it doesn't actually make it to landfall. It still could curve out. If that ridge weakens a little bit along the coast, it could still start curving east again. Even if it does that, though, it's going to be so close to the coast that we're still going to feel a major impact from the Outer Banks up into Hampton Roads.
Emma's asking, these predictions are still using the 5 p.m. data, correct? I thought it was interesting. Our colleague was telling us earlier about the different times of the day.
Yeah.
The Hurricane Center, is it, that releases?
The Hurricane Center's is 5 p.m.
11.
Some of the data is from the 18Z, which is the afternoon run of the models. That's actually runs at about 2 p.m. And then some of the new stuff will start coming in tonight. Hurricane Center right now does 5 p.m. and then 11 p.m. they will have a new update. So when we go on the air at 11, I should have the new information from them as of 11. I don't expect the track to change really at all. It might get extended a little bit. We'll see what they decide to do because it's going to go till 8 o'clock. So they're going to have to add 6 hours to the end of the track. Are they going to pull it farther north or west? I don't know. We'll see. Or are they just going to keep it near the same position? We'll see how that plays out. But that will be at 11 o'clock, so they do 5 a.m., 11, 5, 11. Now, when the storm gets close to land, they will do that every 3 hours, or gets relatively close. Especially, I think if they're in a hurricane warning, that's close enough that they will go to every 3 hours. And then, if the storm is making landfall, they literally give position estimates every hour. But right now, we're every 6 hours.
Fred is wondering, is it possible that Hurricane Florence will hit the state of New York?
Yeah, not as a hurricane, for sure. There were some earlier model runs that tried to bring it up towards New York City and kind of ride the coast, which was scary. That would potentially be as a hurricane, but it looks very unlikely at this point. I would say definitely Long Island or Eastern New York would have a slightly higher threat than, say, Central and Western New York, but at this point they're all kind of low. It's definitely, the data is focusing a little farther south. I wanted to point out one thing that one of our viewers on Facebook pointed out, Dave Wellman. He was in on the discussion last night, and he wrote to me a little bit earlier. He's probably in here now, but he was talking about if you have solar lights, bring them inside. This was a good point, Nick. He said, because if you lose power and you have solar lights, you can put them in the window, and it actually provides lighting in your house. Which was
Nikki D shared a post similar to that earlier that showed them, and that is kind of a neat idea.
Yeah.
Now that we have all those solar things.
Right. I hadn't even thought about that, because a lot of people do have solar lights. So if you lose power, which certainly is a distinct possibility for folks in Eastern Virginia, North Carolina, I'd say we're still questionable about central and western parts of the state, but the eastern part of the state looks like they're going to be hit one way or another.
Chris has an interesting question. Have a flight leaving Richmond on Thursday evening headed to Florida. Should I be concerned?
Well, they know how to fly around these things. That's the good thing. Thursday evening, you'll probably get out of here. You might have to take a long route. You might, also we have to think flights may be delayed because of this storm. It could have a domino effect at various airports. So, if you're flying through Charlotte, that might cause a problem. Or if you're flying through Atlanta, if you're flying north and then going down to Florida, or if you're flying west and going down to Florida, it'd probably be okay. I think you certainly could get out of Richmond. That I wouldn't be concerned about, but it's where you have to fly through.
We have a lot of people asking about preparation updates, and I know that was a story that Jake is working on for CBS 6 News at 11. We also had Ashley that did a story about it yesterday, and it really does seem like we have some great information from the state and VDEM about things you can do, the American Red Cross. Do you remember offhand things that you've heard of for folks to do? I mean, obviously getting those staples for the home. Right. The quick things to do around outside, like cleaning out your gutters, making sure there's no loose limbs, making sure patio furniture's down. I mean, those are easy things you can do. I mean, why not just go to do it just to be safe when we can? We're still quite a few days out. It can't hurt.
And I think I've heard a lot of people actually agreeing with that. Sometimes people are backpedaling, saying, well, I did this the last time and then it didn't happen. Well, wouldn't you rather be safe than sorry and just do it? And if you do it well in advance, you don't have to worry about it later. Having batteries on hand, having flashlights, stocking non-perishable items in your house in case you lose power. These are things that are important. If you have a generator, great. We saw this happen with Isabel, where people lost power for weeks, and that could happen here. Flooding could be an issue. I remember in Isabel, I lost water. That was worse than losing power. I don't know what you do to prepare for losing water, Nick. There's not much you can do at that point except find a friend that has some water, fresh water. So, but think of things if you were stuck at home without power for a few days, what would you absolutely need? Think about your pets. If some of you are tuned in from the coastal areas and you get evacuated, you got to think about, hopefully you have a plan as to what you're going to do with your pet, because sometimes the shelters don't accept pets. Do you have a friend that you can leave the pet with or whatever? We want to think about our pets, because a lot of pets get stranded in disasters like this. So please think about your pet.
Rachel Henderson says, yes, you should go to the liquor store.
Well, Rachel, I'm not going to say do that, but, you know, I'm sure people will chime in and agree with you on that.
Tanya's talking about filling your bathtub with water.
That's true. That's one thing you can do for the water situation. If you have the bathtub filled with water, yes.
And Sandy pointed out you could use your washing machine as a big old ice chest, especially if you don't have the agitator. You can
good
fill
idea.
It up and add
this is why we do these, and it's great on Facebook because everybody can chime in and we can all help each other. That's what we're here for, to get through this storm together. I'm not here to panic people. I don't like when forecasters go and panic people, and I'm not saying anybody's doing that because I haven't seen that, but we all know there are a few around the country that will get, especially online forecasters that want to say, hey, you know, this is the end of the world. Well, it's not the end of the world if we work together and keep ourselves safe. So I want to be here and provide information so you guys are calm, because you'll get through it better if you're calm and prepared.
We really do. Like you were saying earlier, there are so many comments.
There are, and I apologize to those of you that hopped on my thread earlier. And there were over 800 comments, I think, and I just couldn't get to them all. I was trying, but if I answered all the comments, I wouldn't do a forecast. So we're trying, though.
Well, and somebody did raise an interesting point. I mean, assuming they were from an area that would potentially be evacuated, like, where's a good place to go? And I mean, it really depends on the storm's track, and if you maybe had relatives in another state that's quite a ways away and you had time.
I think if you're in Virginia and you're concerned about staying, going north to Maryland, if you've got relatives in Maryland, you know, because right now the focus on this is really in Virginia into North Carolina. Even South Carolina doesn't look as bad, although northern South Carolina will be on the back side of that and they will get hit hard, but you won't have the storm surge that you have on the north side of the storm, because the winds will be bad, but they'll be on the back side of the storm. So that helps. But the people that really need to worry about evacuating are the ones that are in the storm surge way, and that's going to be the Outer Banks, and that's going to be, you know, up into eastern Virginia. I'm hesitant to say, usually we will tell people in the Outer Banks, get inland. And that still is plausible advice here. The problem is, if this storm does come crashing ashore and moves to the west, it's a massive inland flooding threat. Because of the ground that's saturated, you've probably noticed in areas we've seen flooding with just a few showers develop. So imagine if all this rain comes at once, we're going to have massive inland flooding. So I do worry about saying just get inland. I think if you go like Charleston's not so bad here unless the storm changes track, but if you get inland in western South Carolina down into Georgia, you're okay. If you get out into Kentucky, Tennessee, you know, you'll probably be okay if you go north to Maryland. But my worry is just staying in that area. If you've got somebody's home or a place to go where they're not so prone to massive flooding, then it's not as big a deal to go into central parts of Virginia or North Carolina. So you know, we just have to see how this plays out. But coastal areas, you got to get out of there one way or another.
Tammy's asking, what about D.C.?
Yeah, D.C. Somebody asked me about that earlier as well. I don't think it's a major threat. D.C. has a chance at having a decent impact in terms of, could see some rain, maybe a little bit of wind, but it's not going to be the massive impact that is likely in the eastern Carolinas and up into Virginia. So people have been asking me about winds, and we haven't said this in this segment, but Richmond should not worry about hurricane force winds at this point. We don't necessarily expect winds to get close to hurricane force. Likely tropical storm force winds and gusts. That's what you should prepare for. And really, I hate to say this, but there's not a whole lot of difference at this point if you get a 50 or 60 mile an hour wind, which is tropical storm force, versus a minimal hurricane force wind gust, because the ground is saturated. 50, 60 mile an hour wind is going to take down trees anyway. We saw that with Isabel. It was a tropical storm here. So if this thing's a tropical storm and it's bringing tropical storm force winds, we're still going to feel major impact. Up in D.C., I'd say your chances of getting tropical storm force winds are probably minimal, unless the storm starts to drift north, and at that point it probably won't hold together enough to give you much more than a few strong gusts. So DC, cautiously okay right now.
And a lot of people have been asking about potential parallels from that storm with
yeah,
the thread.
Everybody's been trying to make, and it's funny, everybody tries to come up with a parallel storm. And I don't know that there ever is really a perfect parallel. You know, you can throw out 5 or 6 storms and I could find some similarity with it. You know, this thing coming inland, the way the Hurricane Center has it tracked is not much different than Isabel. Isabel came up more right up the I-95 corridor into Richmond, kept going north, so I don't think that's going to happen. But as to the setup here where it's approaching land, it's not that far off Isabel. You know, and impacts change. You know, you can get a monster hurricane in a year where you've had no rain and it's not as bad as what we're worried about now. And I think Isabel really woke a lot of us up. If you remember back, I mean, I covered this storm and we were concerned about Isabel, but when we saw it weaken, the worry wasn't as great, yet it just wiped out all these trees. That part we hadn't really thought about because we were looking at the numbers, and you can't always look at the numbers. You have to look at how the storm impacts the area, and it doesn't take a lot at this point with the saturated ground to do a lot of damage. So for what that's worth, I think a lot of us learned. Meteorologists and folk at home, all of us learned from Isabel.
Elka Kelly Richardson has some good advice. Don't sleep on Hurricane Florence. She can do whatever she wants. Just plan and prepare.
That's true.
Better safe than sorry.
That's true. And she could do what she wants. I think when I say a storm does what it wants, it's not likely to just make a turn on its own. That's going to be forced by something. If it's going to do what it wants, it's just going to plow right inland like some of the forecast tracks are showing. So that's scary.
I'm not sure how we're doing on time.
We're about 10:45, so
we're running a little low on battery, sadly.
Okay. So if you have a couple of important questions, ask them now. We'll give you about 2 or 3 minutes, or if Nick's battery is really dying out, then
we have a little bit more time.
Okay.
I mean, this is kind of an interesting thing. I mean, some people have asked us yesterday about schools closing. I mean, it's too soon to tell, but obviously we would assume.
I would assume if there's a major threat, the schools
yes.
are going to close. I mean, I think that's a pretty safe assumption. You know, if this goes inland and it's clear that the core of the storm is staying in North Carolina, even on Friday, Virginia schools may not close. They may try to get the day in if they think, okay, we're not going to really feel a major impact until, say, Saturday. Then they'll go to school on Friday. But that's kind of tough to predict right now.
Well, and Ian Ellsworth says, why is the prediction a Category 3 or Category 4 rather than a 1 or a 2? Just warm water or question mark?
Yeah, this storm, the reason why it regenerated, it moved out in an area that had a little bit of wind shear. So we're looking at lighter wind shear, which tears the storm apart more at the upper levels. So you've got the wind shear that's an element, and then you've got the water temperature, and it's going to be moving over very warm waters in the Atlantic and into an area where there's very little wind shear. The high confidence in the track is also because the steering currents are starting to shape up. With that ridge starting to build to the north, we feel it's just going to keep going this direction. Where it changes is as it gets closer to the coast, the steering currents are going to weaken a little bit, and that's why we're not sure about that. And as I mentioned, it can strengthen to Category 4, and once it hits the Gulf Stream, it's going to maintain some strength, but if it gets over the other side of the Gulf Stream and it runs closer to land, its interaction with land can actually weaken the storm, even if it's still offshore. So those are multiple things to think about.
Paul is wondering, will evacuating from the Outer Banks to the west end of Richmond be safe?
It's better than staying. Yes. Yeah, I think they just updated the track, by the way, and it's in about the same location. I'm going to open that up and get that set. But, yeah, the west end of Richmond, the only concern I have is if, you know, you're in an area prone to flooding and we do get massive rainfall, there could be some issues there. But you can see this track is about the same. The time's changed, and that's what indicated to me. So now it's landfall closer to Thursday, and it looks to me, Nick, I'd have to read the Hurricane Center's discussion, but it looks to me like they shifted it ever so slightly to the right, maybe just north of Wilmington. It looks like, I think this might have been a little bit lower, but it's ever so slight. So we're still focused on the southeastern North Carolina coast. And notice how these lines are close together. That's a 24-hour period. So this is Thursday at 8 p.m. This is Friday. Yeah, so that shows the slowing down of the storm, because here's Wednesday to Thursday. That's a 24-hour period, folks, and that's the next 24-hour period. So you see the Hurricane Center is indicating that, hey, this thing is really slowing down.
Well, we'll let you go ahead and get ready for CBS 6
Yeah, we're going to wrap
11.
things up, and we got 10 minutes, so do tune in to CBS 6 News at 11. If you're not in the Richmond area, you can watch us online if you want to at WTBR.com/live. I'm going to continue to do these updates during the week on my page, so Nick's got a link to that. I'm sure Zach's going to be here doing a few updates as well, so we'll have you covered one way or another, but do check out my page, give it a like, and I'll try to give you updates as to when I'll be on. I'm sure the folks here will share that as well, but in case they aren't able to, you'll at least know on my page, hey, Mike's coming on with an update, and I'll have a little more time probably than Zach tomorrow to answer some questions, so if you need to ask him, feel free to do that. And thanks to Nick again for helping us out. Gang, stay safe. Good night.